Hey everybody, welcome back. So the video I released a week ago, link in the cards above, where I took a look at 5 different slicers to see which one would produce the best raised colored text, and by colored I mean a different color than the base model, produced quite a bit of angry comments, which kind of really surprised me. Some of them were quite a bit polite and not angry, basically saying that, hey, you know, we think your printer's out of adjustment, and you know, your print doesn't look very good, and if you adjusted your printer it might look better. And some of them were downright insulting, suggesting that I go back to flipping burgers and leave 3D printing to people who you know, had 3 brain cells to rub together. Those weren't the exact words, but you get the idea. And you know what? This is the internet and I'm a big boy, so, and I've been insulted by the best, and these didn't even come close. They were more comical than anything else. But you know what? I thought maybe it's a good idea to address that and see maybe the printer is out of adjustment. So after the first person commented, and it was an interesting comment, it was polite, I did go ahead and go through the all the adjustments on the printer in question. So unfortunately I can't do that in this video, but I do have the prints left over from that other video, and we can go in and we can measure the cubes. And if you've watched this channel, you know this printer, and I have a feeling most of those people that left comments have not seen any of my other videos, just saw that one, and I think they missed the point of that video. The point being, the point was not how I can get the best absolute print possible in that video, although that is the end goal, is to get the best print possible. The point of that video was to see if any one slicer is any better at it than any other. So before we go any further, let's take a look at the printer. This printer, you may remember it, it was donated to the channel as a review piece, and I'll put a link in the cards above again to the review. And I really liked it. It is a Geeetech A10M, or at least that's how it started out life. It's a couple years old, and I've printed a lot with this printer because I really like it. I think the ability to swap filaments, you know, to make shifting colors, to make colors that you don't have, although that doesn't work as well as I would like it to. But it's been a really valuable printer to me, and I like it. It's basically an Ender 3 or a clone of an Ender 3 that can do dual filaments. So the first problem I had with this printer, and I've had a number of problems with it, so I want to talk about those first. The first problem I had with it were the clone Titan extruders that came with it. They were awful. They're a gear reduction extruder. They're terrible. So as soon as I started having problems with it that I diagnosed back to the extruder itself, I tried fixing them, and I eventually just said to heck with it, and I swapped them out for the dual gear Creality style extruders, and there's a link in the cards up above for that too. I did that. I made a video on that. And of course at that point in time I would have adjusted steps per millimeter. I also of course had to go into the firmware and swap the direction it fed, because the gear reduction extruder, the motor had to turn backwards. So I did that. Oh, I also put the Geeetech 3D Touch sensor on it, the clone of the BL Touch. I put that on it, and there's a video for that too. I'll try and get it up there. And the next problem I had with it, and I've got a purge bucket on it, and I'll put a video, I'll put a link. You know what, I'll just put a link to my entire Geeetech A10M playlist, and you guys can look at that if you're interested. I've also got the Creality bendable PEI steel sheet on it. But the first serious problem I had with it after the extruders was the main board failed. And it would still print, but every 4 or 5 minutes, or maybe even less, the hot end would go all the way out to one end of the bed and pause for a second and then come back. And I spent weeks trying to diagnose that. I swapped motors and cables. I did all kinds of stuff. I reflashed the firmware multiple times. I never could solve it. So I decided to replace the main board. And instead of replacing it with another Geeetech A10M board, because the one that came in it was no longer available, I would have had to update to a new version of it, which would have required some other changes. I didn't like some of the things I was hearing from Geeetech about it, so I decided to go with a Big Creetech SKR 1.4 board, turbo. So I swapped that in I put the color screen on it at the same time. I forget the name of the color screen. It's the small one, like 1.4. I forget the size of it. Anyway, that all worked. It put the link to my swapping this board out and everything I went through will also be in the Geeetech A10M playlist. Obviously, at that point in time, steps per millimeter for everything got done. It got 2209 steppers on it. I also originally had it set up for sensorless homing, but I had another problem I couldn't solve, and I went back to the limit switches. The sensorless homing wasn't my problem. I did eventually find it, but by then I had the limit switches set back up, and I just decided to leave it that way. So that got done. The printer worked for a long time, months after that without a problem. I got good prints on it. Here's one of the prints I made on it. Whoops. Here's one of the prints I made on it. This was for a test of, I think this was a test of Area-1 filament. I printed at one point in time, I can't remember which set of upgrades it was, I printed this little Jeep model. That worked out really well on it. And there's a bunch of other stuff I printed. I don't keep little ornamental things around, vases and skull towers that I've done for filament test. I throw those out because this is a small house and this is a small space I'm in, so I don't keep that stuff around. So the next thing that happened to this printer was I stripped out the nozzle threads on the hot end. And it just so happened a couple of weeks before I had ordered this JS Yong mix hot end from AliExpress. I saw it, I thought it looked really interesting. I thought it would cure my ability to not be able to mix colors as nicely as I would like it. So I got it and I put it on there. I had, of course, to manufacture, to design and print a new mount for it, and that's the mount you see on it now. And I got that all done, and of course at that time I had to go through all the steps per millimeter and everything all again. So that, I think, is the last thing I did. The printer works really well. Here is I printed 4 hinges up for a project here just like the week before I made the video about the slicers and the raised text. I made some of these hinges for someone and they printed really nice and they snap loose. And another thing you got to remember is I mostly create functional parts. I'm not that interested in pretty. I want the part to be strong. I want it needs to look acceptable, but it doesn't have to be beautiful. So I tend to print with a 0.3 or 0.32 layer height and a wide line width just to make it go fast, and tends to be strong that way too. Lately I have been using CHEP's ultra fast profile. I had to adopt it from the Ender 3 to the Geeetech A10M, but it works really well. But this hinge printed fine and it snapped right loose and it works fine, and the hinges are now on that project. So I know the printer works right. But you know what? Let's get the cubes. These are 20 millimeter cubes that I did. Let's get these out. Let's measure them and let's print some new ones. I went through all the adjustments in it. I printed a temperature tower. I printed a bunch of cubes. I found a loose screw that let the hot end wobble a little. That's on me. That was a mistake on my part. I just missed that when I tightened this all back up, put it back together. I adjusted the rollers, the belts. I adjusted all the steps per millimeter. Nothing was out very much. The E-steps was perfect. So I didn't have to adjust that at all. But you know what? All the other steps were very close, but I went out of my way to get them perfect. So let's measure the cubes I did for that last video, and let's print a couple cubes, and we'll see where it is now. And let's print a Benchy too, and we'll see what the Benchy looks like, and then you guys can comment on it. And if you still think they're the worst looking prints you've ever seen, well, you know what? Then I guess we'll have to agree to disagree, and we'll move on from there. And let's get the cubes printed. Let's get a Benchy printed, and let's see what we think this printer is doing now. And if I think it's good, then we'll move on to continue the raised text adjustments and me trying to get the best raised color. Okay, text. So here are 5 20 millimeter cubes, and all I did was take a 20 millimeter cube and I put a letter on the top, and this was one of my tests in that last video. And I have them marked. They still have the original markings from the other video. Idea Maker Prusa Slicer, Super Slicer, Cura 4, and Cura 5. Here is a caliper. Let's zero it. And let's start with the one I printed with Idea Maker. Let me get that one back up there. Sorry, that was Prusa Slicer. Let's measure it. So we are 20.12 that way, 20.07 that way, and we are 19.56 that way. The Z was the one that was off the worst. That was what Idea Maker. Here's the one I did in Prusa Slicer. Z in this one is 19.76. We are 20.10, 20.15. Super Slicer 19.52. So yeah, it's off a little bit, isn't it? 20.56. 20.08, Cura 4, 19.67, 20.11, 20.02, Cura 5, 19.84, 19.90, and 20.29. So honestly, while they're off a little, it really was pretty consistent. And you know what? These were printed in a 0.2 layer, or excuse me, 0.32 layer height. These weren't supposed to be the most beautiful cubes imaginable. They were supposed to print fast, and since each slicer was going to have the same settings and be printed on the same printer, the goal was to find out which of the 5 slicers to continue with, so I didn't have to print 5 prints every time I made an adjustment. And I have done that. Prusa Slicer to me does the best raised text. Once I get it as good as I can and I tweak everything else, I may go back and try the others. I've been fooling with Cura 5 a lot, and honestly, I like it. But in my initial test, it does not do raised text as good as Prusa Slicer, so that's the one I'm going to go forward with. So now that I've made all the adjustments to the printer, let's print some more cubes. And you know what? Let's not do it in every one, because I just don't want to waste that much filament with this. Let's get the one up from Cura 5. Here it is here. We'll use Cura 5 for this because it is supposed to give excellent dimensional accuracy. And where did the caliper go? Let's make sure the caliper is zeroed. Again, it is still reading 0. Z height is 19.76. And X and Y is 19.83 and 19.85. So now that I've made all the adjustments, tightened the belts, done everything else, oh, and you know, the temperature tower, I gotta tell you, it's honestly hard to pick out one that's significantly better than the other. If I had to pick out one, I'd probably say 195 is better. I was running 210 because I like the increased strength that 210 offers over 195, or at least what I think is better strength. I haven't tested it with this particular filament. Maybe I should. Maybe we should go back to doing more hammer tests. But anyway, I'm going to go down to 200 because honestly I think 195 is a little too cold for the type of print I want. Anyway, I'm going to print some of these same 20mm cubes, and you know what? I'm just going to print these again so you guys don't think I'm pulling a fast one by printing a regular XYZ calibration cube. Since I don't have any of those for the way the printer was before, I'll just print that cube again. And let's print a Benchy too, and we'll see where we're at. Maybe I'll try Chep's super fast profile, and I will try maybe a 0.2 profile, and we'll see, we'll see what we see. Okay, so here are the 3 prints I made. All 3 of these were done with Chep's 0.28 super fast profile. It's actually not his profile because his profile was an Ender 3 profile and I can't use it for the Geeetech A10M, but what I did was I simply went through and copied all of his changes into a stock, as it is Geeetech A10M profile, and I really didn't change anything else. So this is his 0.28 super fast profile. So let's see how far out of whack the printer really is. Here is the hollow cube, 20mm cube, with the letter in the center, and let's turn this on and make sure we're zeroed. 0, and we are 20.04, 20.08, and in the Z we are 20.03. Alright, I also printed an XYZ cube just so we can tell for sure which axis is which. In the X dimension, we are 20 on the nose on this one. In the Y dimension, we are, it doesn't seem right, I'm on a bump, 20.018. I think I'm still on a little bit of a bump there. Yeah, there we go, that's better. 19.98. And the Z was a little bumpy too because this is kind of a fast and rough one. Find the flat spot here. There we go. There's a flat spot that doesn't have any bumps. 19.99. You can see I'm not holding any pressure on it. It's just kind of a rough top surface. And there's a lot of bumps around that inset Z. So, and let's take a look at the Benchy. Again, this Benchy was in Chep's 0.28 settings, and so it printed in right about an hour. I think an hour and 1 or an hour and 2 minutes. And and the reason I'm starting to like that, and I wasn't using that until very recently, the reason I'm liking that is because it prints faster than my best. Not a huge amount faster, but I'd say 10 to 15% faster. Plus, it's finer. It prints nicer. Hugely nicer? No. But nicer? Absolutely. So, I mean, there you have it. Can it print a better Benchy than this? Certainly it can. I could print it at 0.1 layer height and get a better Benchy than this. Am I gonna? No, I'm not. Because this is absolutely good enough for my needs. So I hope this lays to rest once and for all how far out of whack this printer is, and should I go back to flipping burgers or not. Not that I ever really did, because I've never flipped burgers. I'm just using that as a silly example. Nobody actually said that. So there you go. Now, can we kindly go back to doing normal stuff and without me having to prove my printer functions right and I know how to set it? Thanks. Catch you guys in the next one. Bye for now.